3:01, so I reckon we'll get started. So I'm Damon. I'm the president of the Monash Actuarial Student Society. And I just wanted to say a big welcome to everyone, to all of you members of the actuarial cohort for 2020. Okay, so yeah, just want to say a really big welcome, especially to our first years. Hopefully, this will clear up a lot of the questions you have about actuarial science, because it is a bit complicated with the course structure and the accreditation requirements. So this information session is for you, as well as all of our other actuarial students to learn more about the changes that we've got in terms of accreditation requirements. As budding actuaries, we probably all know the probability of extreme events occurring that live in the tails of the distributions that we study in class. So who'd have thought we'd be living through one? But that's what this year has presented us with. So in order to navigate these uncharted waters, MAFS will be bringing you a range of online events this year. In the next few weeks, we've got things such as a first year meet and greet, a Women in STEM bingo, and an inaugural MAFS Family Feud. So make sure to stay tuned and get involved in all of those. I'd like to now introduce Brett, the Head of Actuarial Studies at Monash, and Julie Cook, our accredited actuary here at Monash. So I'll hand it over to you guys now.
All right. Well, I think I'm first one up, so I will share I'll say hello, everybody. My name is Julie Cook, and I'm a nominated accreditation actuary for the actuarial program, as well as a tutor for ETC 2430 actuarial statistics, for which those students got a test tomorrow. So hopefully some of them are listening in, but also studying hard. So I'd like to share our PowerPoint that we've put together. So we'll have a go at that. And yep, that's hopefully working there. All right. Brett, do you want to introduce yourself, or just wait till it's your turn?
That's fine. You go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So what is an actuary? And making financial sense of the future. So actuaries are very much focused on risk and the value of future liabilities or future assets, and the risks and opportunities for business and society. And so we need to be good at maths, but also be able to communicate what we know to our clients and to the broader public as well. So we apply our modelling, forecasting concepts to real life scenarios. And in terms of a real life scenario, as Damon's already mentioned, COVID-19, actuaries are very much involved in looking at what's the impact of increased risk of death, disablement, sickness. How is that impacting on life insurance companies, on superannuation companies, looking at people's retirement benefits? What does it mean for general insurance companies, where a lot of travel insurance policies people have had to cancel and may well be claiming benefits from those various insurance companies? We've also seen incredible volatility of asset values, which has an impact on all of those financial institutions that are invested in the share market. What impact does that have on companies as well as individuals as well? And things like we're going to have an economic recession in some way, and different business conditions going forwards once we get through this crisis. And actuaries are involved in understanding or trying to evaluate the impact of all those changes and modelling them to try and understand and help their clients manage through this particular crisis. Every day kind of changes at the moment. So why would you become an actuary? There's a lot of different reasons why you might become an actuary. For me, probably the first thing was that as a challenging career, I was good at maths, and people said to me, "Oh, you're good at maths. You know, you could become an actuary." I didn't know what an actuary was at the time, so probably for me, the first thing was about how I could use my maths. But then I was able to use my maths in working with, I guess, people who, as actuaries, have high professional standards, and I very much enjoyed working with those people in being able to advise our clients. And the third one was making a difference to business and society. So I worked in the superannuation industry, where we help individuals and companies to help their employees to save for retirement. So that was something I felt quite strongly about when I started my career. So what makes a good actuary? There's maths, computing, business awareness and communication skills, plus experience and judgment. And you start learning these skills at university, but it doesn't just stop there. After university, then there's continuing study through the Actuaries Institute. So it could be that it takes you another, maybe another 3 to 5 years of study after graduating to become a fully qualified actuary. But even then, you actually need to keep developing your skills and your professional knowledge with undertaking continuing professional development activities, which is what the Actuaries Institute provides. And many actuaries get involved in volunteering in the education of other actuaries and mentoring of students and actuaries in their business lives. So the diverse career opportunities, this is a slide from the Actuaries Institute website, just to show that quite a number of different practice areas that actuaries work in. And the biggest ones are the insurance ones: general insurance, life insurance, superannuation is another large one, but banking, data analytics, and health insurance are very much growing practice areas as well. Yeah, so that's my part there, I think. And if Brett's ready, I will stop sharing my screen and he can start.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. I think probably most of you know who I am, having, if you've studied at Monash and done first year stats, you'll have had me as your chief examiner in first year, and then I'm also teaching the actuarial statistics unit. And therefore, if you're taking the actuarial statistics unit, you'll know that I'm not an actuary, but I'm teaching and coordinating the program, the actuarial program. That gives me one small advantage over Julie, and that is that I can sort of step and look at the actuarial program, I guess, from a little bit more of an outsider's point of view, which occasionally might be helpful to you in sort of thinking about where it fits and how it fits with the overall program of commerce degree and that kind of stuff. So Julie's talked to you a little bit about, the actuary and the skills that actuaries require. And it's actually, I'll just pause on this particular slide here just to just remind you that that's kind of the sort of core things that make up anybody who's working in the sort of business statistics, econometrics kind of area, is strong mathematical skills, good computing skills, and then a sort of an interest in business. And that kind of triangle of maths and data and business is kind of what makes for anyone who might want to do data analytics or econometrics or actuarial studies. And so whichever of those fields you sort of end up putting most of your emphasis on, those are the skills that that's going to kind of motivate you to be heading in that direction. So that kind of gives a little bit of a hint to us in terms of these jobs that Julie's referred to here, is that you'll notice that not all of these jobs are in what you might think of as traditional actuarial roles. So general insurance and life insurance and superannuation is the sort of things that people think of when they think actuaries, but actuaries are working in a whole range of other areas, anywhere that's got to do with money and risk and uncertainty and that sort of thing. So the skill set's fairly broad. Now, I'm going to assume that I'm mostly talking to first year or second year students. So I'll kind of, and in fact, mostly to first years, but I'll obviously have some comments for you if you're beyond first year. So you're well aware of the fact probably that within your course that you're studying, that you can choose an actuarial studies major in one of two ways, either as a major within the commerce degree or as one of the commerce specialist degrees, the Bachelor of Actuarial Science. I haven't mentioned the Master of Actuarial Studies because the target audience of this thing is undergraduates, but obviously the Masters is another path that people take. So you're here, you're doing a commerce degree or you're doing a commerce specialist, you're heading towards actuarial studies as a major. Where do you want to end up? Well, ultimately, if you pursue the actuarial path in its entirety, you'll go through 3 stages. The first stage will be what's called the foundation program, which is effectively what you do in your undergraduate years. Then you'll do the actuary program, which is done either in an honours year or as part of a master's, plus a bit of extra study with the institute. So you can't do the whole actuary program at university. You do kind of half of it at the university and half of it with some external study that you do after you complete your course and when you've got your first job. So that's kind of the traditional path that gets you to stage 1, foundation, and stage 2, actuary program. And then stage 3 is the fellowship program, which is referred to in this slide, this part of the slide here as part 3. And that's where you do more study through the institute, not through the universities, which is complemented by your actual experience in the workplace. So fellowship is kind of the pinnacle of where people are aiming for, and certain types of jobs that you have to be a fellow. If you're the chief actuary of an organisation, then you have to be accredited fellow. But lots of the roles in the actuarial department in an organisation may be filled by people who are not fellows. They may be having other levels of qualifications. So kind of coming back to the present and thinking about how do I get there as a student? Well, I do my undergraduate degree and I try and get through the foundation program as far as I can. Then I finish my course and go and do an honours degree or a master's and tick off the subjects that are required for the actuary program. And then I get myself a job in industry. That's kind of the traditional path through the universities. Your goal all the way through is you've got to get distinction marks on your Monash units to get what's called exemption from the the foundation program or the actuary program. So this is a bit more specifics about how it works. So this is the current foundation program structure and the undergraduate units that relate to it. I could show you a slide it's the same as this, which has the master's units, and if you saw the slide for the master's units, you'll see they're very similar, but there are sort of level 5 coded versions of most of these units, which you do. But let's think like an undergraduate. You can see here there's a couple of, starting at the bottom, there's a couple of sort of core business units, which are mostly taken by economics and accounting and finance units at first and second year. Then you've got actuarial modelling units, which are a bit of mixture of second and third year units. And then you've got the statistics side of things in these CS1 and CS2, which is a mixture of second and third year units with a bit more of a statistical slant. Now, if you look at that set of units there, I think it's, 4, 8, there's about 15 units, I think, on that table there. So a fair chunk of your degree is going to be taken up with ticking off those units. And so you're going to have to design your course to see if you can achieve the distinction mark in each of those units, or at least an average within each of these subjects. This is a subject, these are units of the distinction level. So for example, if I choose a simple one, suppose you do the first 2 first-year economics units. If you want to get exemption for CB2, you need to get a weighted average of at least 70% in these 2 first-year economics units. These are the weights. Okay, so you can afford to get a little bit below 70 in one of them, but you're going to have to make up for it with an above 70 in the other. Now, there's a few extra little complicated rules that Julie applies for things like, higher level units, perhaps sometimes getting, there being a sort of minimum result of 60% in certain units and what have you. So it's a bit more complicated than that, but roughly speaking, that's what you're aiming to do. Okay, so that's kind of how you get there. By the way, pause for a moment. I'll pause for a moment. If you have any questions, feel free. Now, while I've got full screen here, I can't actually see your chat questions, but perhaps Julie, if you see anyone pop a question up in chat, you can have a look at it and we can pause and talk about as we go. Okay, so your first task is to sort of be comfortable with this sort of structure here, and then to apply that structure to the particular course you're enrolling in. But a little proviso first. If you start your course in 2020, life is simple. There's a new structure, you just follow the new course. If you started your course before this year, then you started your course under a different set of course rules, because the program, the Institute's requirements have changed, and the units that we require you to do have changed in 2019. So we've changed the course structure to comply with that. And so the world is simple for you. If you start in 2020, everything follows the new structure. If you started before that, you may be doing some of your exemptions under Part 1 instead of Foundation Program. That's the old Institute process. This is the new one. Or you may be doing your course under the old course rules as opposed to the new course rules. So your situation may be a little more complicated, and those of you who are in your second year or more probably already very familiar with all of that, because you've been puzzling over it as you've been doing your unit selection this year. But the general approach that I would suggest you take is, if you only started last year, is going into second year now, switch to the new course rules and follow the actuary program that's here. So for example, there's one unit, BFC 2340, which used to be required in the Bachelor of Actuarial Science, is no longer. So it's no longer required for the Foundation program. It's no longer required for the Bachelor of Actuarial Science as a result. But if you stick to the old course rules, you'll need to do it. So smartest thing to do is just switch to the new program, and then you won't have to worry about that. Now that's getting a bit complicated, so I won't go into any more detail here about that, but feel free to ask your question later. This is only really relevant for those of you who've not first years this year. So if you're doing a Bachelor of Commerce with an Actuarial Studies
We've
major.
got a question. Do you want to stop for a question?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Oh, it's all right. No, sorry, Nee's dealt with it. But maybe we can. So
Go
from Noah was asking, he's transferred into the course this year straight to second year. Should he be completing the new structure?
If you're transferring into the course this year, you will be under the new structure. You've got no choice.
No choice. Yep.
The structure for the course that applies for you by default is the structure that applied in the first year that you joined the course. So, yeah.
Good.
And just to weigh in there as well, I advise anyone who can switch to the new course structure, do. It'll make your life a lot easier, especially because some of the older units are getting phased out. So I believe this year the Monash Business School is running both the older ones and some of the newer ones, so that the older ones can finish off on the old system. But generally, moving to the new system is going to be your best bet.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep, I agree with that comment. I designed the new system, so I think it's better. But more importantly, it follows the Institute's requirements that are current. So obviously, it's going to be more helpful to you. So one of the new major rules for the Bachelor of Commerce, this is how it looks like. So you've got your core units for the degree, which are basically the first year units, and a capstone unit. But to complete a major, you've got to do 8 units in that major. And this is the way we specify those 8 units here. So we've got 5 of them that you have to do, 3 from second year, sort of the core second year units, a bit of data analytics and a bit of statistical theory here, probability and math stats here, and then actuarial stats here. So these are kind of the core foundational, if you like, sort of theoretical units that underpin all the studies. So we want everybody to do those. And then we've got the 2 main sort of insurance units at third year, the general insurance and the life insurance units, if you like. Okay, so that's kind of the 5 units that you must do. And then you've got a big long list of other units, and you would need to do at least 3 of those. Now, this looks a bit weird, because if you go back a couple of slides, there's a whole stack of units there. And in fact, all those units on that slide are actually here. So why aren't we asking you to do more than 3 from this list? And the answer is the rules of the Bachelor of Commerce say a major comprises of 8 units. So we can't tell you to do more than 3. We can only tell you to do 5 here and 3 here. But in fact, if you're doing an actuarial major and you want to get exemption with the Institute, you'll be doing basically all of these units, or as many of them as you can fit in, because all of them have to go here somewhere. Okay, so yeah, you'll find yourself choosing as many of those as you can fit in. There's sort of two small exceptions that I'll mention in passing. This 2410 is not one of the required units in the foundation program, but it is a prerequisite for this one here, 3460. So you have to do it in order to do 3460, which is required. And likewise, the maths unit is not one of the Institute's requirements, but you'll find very quickly, if there's any third year students in this chat, then I'm sure they'll agree. Things get a bit tough mathematically, even in second year and certainly at third year. So the more maths you've got in preparing yourself for later year actuarial units, the better. So we encourage you to do that. But strictly speaking, you can survive without doing any more maths at uni and just concentrate on the other units. Now, a lot of you doing a Bachelor of Commerce will be doing a double degree. So if you're doing a single degree, life's easy for you. You can do all of these units, plus your compulsory units, plus your capstone unit, and still have about half a dozen units for electives. So you could probably basically get a second major in there if you wanted to, in business analytics or in finance or something like that. So that's kind of a fairly straightforward task, designing your course for a Bachelor of Commerce student who wants to get maximum exemptions. If you're doing a double degree with engineering, for example, at the most extreme, then it's not quite that simple. All of the electives you've got in your commerce degree are being taken up by engineering units and vice versa. So you just can't fit all of these units here into your course, which means you can't get all of the exemptions that the Institute wants you to get during your study at Monash, at least during your undergraduate course. You just can't fit all these units in a double degree with engineering, and probably can't do it with law as well, and most of the others, just because you've got a few more constraints. So that's not the end of the world. Don't panic about that. There's benefits of a double degree, and you know, you'll think about as you go through. Some people get partway through the double degree and think, you know what, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an engineer or an actuary, but I've done enough of it now to know that I definitely don't want to be an engineer. And I do definitely want to be an actuary. Well, then they might drop the engineering and just go to a straight BCom. Or they might do the opposite. They say, why on earth did I choose this commerce thing? I want to become an engineer. Well, then you can drop the commerce and go to the single degree. So that's sort of one scenario you consider. The other option you might consider is that you just do what you can out of this set of units. Try and carefully choose them so that you get sets of units that tick off as many of these as you can. There's no point doing 3 out of the 4 from CS1 and 3 out of the 4 from CS2, because you get to the end of your course and you don't have exemption for CS1 or CS2. And then if you want to get exemption for those, you've got to go and do those subjects by distance education with the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK. And you have to do the whole of CS1 again. Doesn't matter if you've done 3/4 of it at Monash. They don't pay any attention to that. They say, go do the whole lot again. And then you'd have to go and do CS2 as well. So a smarter thing to do is to choose your set of units so that you tick off all of CS1 and miss out a couple of more units in CS2 or vice versa. Okay, so just think about that a little bit. If you're not able to do the whole lot, it's not the end of the world, but at least be a bit smart about which ones you do and which ones you don't. I'm just going to make a little comment about this slide here as well. And this is my version of the course progression map, as it were, that's put together by, it's not the same as the one that you'll get if you go to the student advisors. I've never actually seen the one they produce for you, but I find their maps a little bit confusing. So, and I prefer to just sort of stick to the rules and figure it out and make up my own map. If I was in your position, that's what I'd be doing. But I put this together just to give you a little bit of a guide. Again, it really only works for a straightforward single degree BCom. And it reflects some of the logic in my mind about sort of degree of difficulty of different units and combinations of units that might make sense. So it's sort of just worth listening to and thinking about it as to how your course is going. So obvious thing to do is you start with first year units, and then you go to second year units, and then you go to third year units. Okay, so that's how it's structured. Try and get, this is a commerce degree, so you'll see most of your first year is indeed first year units. So it's a fairly traditional structure here, in that essentially virtually all first year, virtually all second year, virtually all third year. Okay, so that's pretty standard. There's not really anything that you would do different there. The only thing that you might have been tempted to do is perhaps choose a different, instead of 3580, you might have chosen one of these other units that are in semester 2 third year. choose one of them and do it at second year. But in fact, I think you'll find you pretty much can't do that. Well, you can do that. For example, you could do ETC 35-30 in semester 2 of year 2, because its only prerequisite is ETC 24-30. So that would be an option. You could swap that one in there and shift 35-80 to the end. You can do that. There's a benefit and a disadvantage of that. And this is just one example, but just to illustrate. The benefit of that is that you're in this plan here. This is a really tough semester, the last one. I've got down here 3 difficult units. And it's kind of not surprising, the hard units come at the end. But it's, you know, if you could design things in a perfect world, you wouldn't put 3 of the toughest units in the whole course in one semester. But it kind of works out with progression that's sort of pretty much almost the only way of doing it. So if you can avoid that by putting 35-30 here in second year, that's a little bit of an advantage. So that might be worth considering. Having said that, it is a third year unit. It kind of, and so little bits and pieces of things that you learn, for example, in 34-30 actually become useful to you. They're useful knowledge in 35-30. So there's not a prerequisite from here to here, but it would be probably on balance better to keep 35-30 to the end or towards the end of your course after you've done others, just because it's a fairly tough unit to get an exemption result in. But if you got through 24-30 with flying colours, you're feeling confident, you're good on your maths, then you might be tempted to jump in to do 35-30 here and save up 35-80 to this year. And comparatively speaking, 35-80 is a relatively easy unit. So it'll be a nice easy unit alongside a couple of tough ones. So that's a nicer balanced semester. Okay, so that's going into a little bit more detail than perhaps I should given the time, but it's just giving you be sort of thinking out loud about another dimension to this, which is not in the, you know, course maps or the unit outlines, which is sort of which units are the hard ones and which are not the hard ones. Okay, let me zoom through the rest. This is the Bachelor of Actuarial Science, new structure. Those of you who are doing it will know it well. In this case, because it's a specialist degree, your major comprises of basically, I think 12 units or something like that. So it's got more units within the major. So here's one of the 12, the capstone, and here's the other 11. So you'll see now, and there's actually only 12 units listed here. So like with the commerce degree, you'd probably do all of them. But if you don't do all of them, if you just do the minimum, you're still going to get virtually all of your exemptions with the institute. You need only to do one extra unit to get all the exemptions. So obviously you'd use up one of these electives on one of these units here. I've got a suggested course progression here for the Bachelor of Actuarial Science, which is a bit similar to the other one. For the commerce degree, a little bit more flexibility, but I've tried to achieve a similar goal of getting you to do sort of first years and then second years and then third year units. And I've got the same problem in the last year of 3 tough units at the end, but because of the sort of logical progression and the fact that most units are only offered in one semester, you sort of almost can't avoid that. In this case, whatever you do, make sure this little elective unit down here is a nice, easy one. You know, choose something that you can even choose one of these first year units and put it down there if you felt very like do another economics and save it up to here, or just a nice easy unit in, I don't know, I better not say what I think are easy units because they might be different to what you think, but you know, make at least one of your 4 units something you're not too stressed about. Okay, that's enough kind of from me, I think, just about course structure and course progression. You may have a few questions about that. I haven't said anything at all about the master because I'm assuming we don't have master's students primarily here, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Julie, shall I hand to you, or do I have any questions you'd like me to answer?
Before we jump on and move into the next half of the session, while we're talking about units, I just wanted to bring up for all of our first years that we've put together a unit guide. So if you go on MAS's website and you can find MAS unit guide, what we've done is we've collated testimonies from all other students who've been through that unit in the past, with advice on the important topics, how to stay on top of it, what textbooks you need, what study tips, and how hard the unit is. We've done a little gauge for you. So feel free to check that out.
Good, thank you. That's great. Yeah, that's good. Good point. And your best guide to the sort of informal information about units is other students, and so probably I would say, and I should make the comment too while I've got you, that the Actuarial Student Society, I think, isn't your club won the Club of the Year for the last 2 years?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, that's right. And one
I
reason
believe the statistic is we've won 4 out of the last 5 years.
Okay, 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
Okay, what happened to number 5? We won't worry about that. But that's,
Yeah.
that's a pretty impressive effort, and obviously this year is going to be pretty different given the circumstances. But one of the things that Actuarial Student Societies does really well is that, I mean, it keeps everybody's focus on academic achievement and successful academic achievement. And you are in this together. There's no quota for how many people can get that 70% average. Okay? All of you can get it. So if you can help each other to get there with that 70% average with kind of sharing of experience and what have you, then that's fantastic. So make use of the club is one of the ways you can build your networks, and that'll help you do better.
Did we want to pause for some questions, or did you want to keep going through your presentation and then take all of them at the end?
Yeah, maybe Julie, would you like to? Why don't you keep going, Julie?
Yeah. Okay, there's not.
And we'll do questions at the end.
Yes, I can see a couple of questions which I'll look at, but
There's not a lot more from me, so I'll share my screen. Oh, and I'll have to get to where we were up to. So Brett's covered all those. So I'm just going to be speaking about these. Oh, hang on. No, that went back there. Why did that do that? Hang on. Let's see if I can.
Control F5 will get you there.
There we go. In fact, let me get to the one I want to there. All right. And slideshow.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. All right. Thank you. I'm still learning some of this technology. So just wanted to speak about my role as a nominated accreditation actuary. So I'm the link between Monash and the Actuaries Institute, and I've got a little picture there of the Actuaries Institute webpage, because what Brett's been speaking about as well is the Actuaries Institute do their own education program. So you don't have to go to Monash to become an actuary, but you can make life easier for yourself by studying at Monash, studying those units that Brett has set out, and if you achieve that distinction average, then you can be exempt from parts of that education program from the Actuaries Institute. And that's something that's been running for a very long time. When I studied to become an actuary, the only university in Australia that ran an actuarial program was at Macquarie University in Sydney. So I travelled from Melbourne up to Sydney to do my undergraduate degree at Macquarie, and that gave me exemption from the first part, or the foundation program of the Actuaries Institute. And certainly the Institute, I guess, recognises that there is an advantage for students to be learning in a university environment, and also broadening their learning as well in the other, where you have, what's the word, where you have choices about what other subjects you might do, electives, that's the word I'm thinking of, so that you have the opportunity to have a broader education, as well as to cover the requirements that the Actuaries Institute need. So my role, being that link and making sure that our accreditation process, so that all the units that Monash offers are assessed to see that they're covering the syllabus that's required, as well as covering that syllabus at the appropriate level. So that when you've finished your degree, you can come to me and say, ask me to recommend you for exemption. So there's a process of you applying to me as the nominated accreditation actuary. I'll look at your grades and recommend you to the Actuaries Institute, and then you go on to the Actuaries Institute and apply for membership, and they'll grant your exemptions, and then you'll keep studying, because the foundation program is just the start, as Brett was speaking about. Then there's the actuary program and the fellowship program. So just to finish off, from my perspective, was to give you some some tips to help you with your study and your future employment. So my first one is about connecting with the Actuaries Institute. So you can become a university subscriber for no cost. And what that will do is give you access to some of the publications that the Actuaries Institute puts out. And I think I really recommend that you start having a look at what is there on the Actuaries Institute website. Have a look at the sorts of topics that actuaries are writing about. So all those COVID-19 implications, actuaries are busy trying to think through what impact it has on their business, and they're writing articles about it and sharing it with other actuaries as part of that professional behaviour that actuaries have. So I encourage you to connect with the Actuaries Institute, and then practice professional behaviour. So you're not graduated yet, but you can practice this, that in terms of respect for your teachers and students, just like actuaries to have respect each other as professionals, and need to be thoroughly prepared for lectures and assessments and meet the timeframes and deliverables. That's the sort of professional behaviour that is expected of you as an actuary. And the last point is about there are valuable resources available to you, that you can access. So here at Monash, you've got our academic staff, you've got the Student Society, you've got each other, and you've probably got, hopefully, your parents and other adults that you can be speaking to who've got some perhaps experience in the business world, and try and read widely to try and get a flavour of what's actually happening out in the economy now. And a final thing would be if you can find somebody who might mentor you, who can actually share their experiences and mentor you in your study and your career going forwards. So that's all that I wanted to say there. So if I come back here and see what questions we have.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I've just been browsing through the questions while Julie's been speaking, so maybe we could just sort of skim our way down through the questions and pick up on any that people have asked already, and then feel free to type, or if Damon's brave, he can unmute you and you can speak up and ask, but I'll let you work out how to handle it. Yep, so we had the question about transferring in this year. There's a good question here. If we're doing a double degree in actuarial science and commerce, well, then you've obviously got lots of flexibility. And what commerce majors would help complement studying actuary? The obvious one to go next to an actuarial program would be finance, because obviously they're both in the world of money and time. But probably the second most popular would be business analytics, and probably the third most popular after that might be economics or econometrics. So that sort of would be my observation from the outside. I think one benefit of doing a sort of double major, or a major with finance and actuarial studies, is in the finance major you probably do get a little bit more understanding of the finance industry and investments and financial products and the like, and some of the regulatory environment that you're working in, which actuaries tend to need to know a reasonable amount about, but they get some of, but not a whole stack of that within the actual subjects that you study in your actuarial program. So I think that complements pretty well, but the business analytics one would be also popular simply because actuaries are increasingly moving in that direction of data and business analytics, and a lot of the future growth in the sort of actuarial profession is in big data, being smart with data, and so some analytic skills would be very valuable. The actuary program, which is kind of like the honours/masters program, has some data and a data analytics unit, as does some of your undergraduate units, or actually data analytics units or business analytics units. So you're going to get few of those units already. So, but if you've got space, doing another 4 or 5 or 6 units, doing a bit more machine learning and what have you would be pretty handy, I think, in terms of being sort of seen as the expert. The good thing about when you graduate as a young actuary with good skills in the analytics side is that you'll be better at that than your boss is, because your boss will have done their study in another generation when no one was doing R programming and no one was doing machine learning and all those sort of things. So they'll be coming to you and asking you for help. And that's pretty handy. You bring an expertise or a skill to the workplace as a sort of young actuary. So that'd be my thoughts. Do you want to add anything to that, Julie? Yeah.
No, that sounds exactly right.
Sure.
The next question is about a course map for master's program. And I was just going to show students where all our exemption information is on the website.
Good idea to that.
So if I can, here we go. So on the Monash site, you can see the links there, but there's a page about exemptions, which covers undergraduate and masters. So all of those, all of these, hang on, so where have we got all the courses? Must be under here, maybe, there we go. So that's that same sort of table for the foundation program subjects and the equivalent Monash units. And at the master's level, we're looking to get some of the actuary program subjects, which are actuarial control cycle and data analytics principles that can be studied here at Monash. So that's where you find all of that sort of information for both undergrad and masters.
Good.
Just to add to that for Anthony, yeah, so you could, if you want to get a visual, just like Brett had up there, you can essentially build your own by just making sure you've done the appropriate prerequisite requirements, and then you can fill it in accordingly. I've also got a link here, which I'm sending, which is the 2019 version of the master's one. So it's a good visual, which you can base it off. But I don't believe the business school has released the 2020 master's version yet. So I'll have to hand that over to the authorities to correct me on that, because I haven't been able to find a 2020 version. So all I could find was this 2019 link.
So for 2020, what I would suggest to any master's student doing 2020 would have received a video from me where I went through a quite suggested.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it doesn't have a nice document or a map with it, but it's a video that was sort of like an orientation video. It's on the ETC 2430 videos YouTube site. So if anyone wants the link to that, I can send it to you. So you can send the wrong one. Yeah, it's okay. I'm pretty sure in that I'll give you a bit of a suggestion of how you structure your course. But Damon's exactly right. Master's students don't have a lot of choice. You've got to fit this set of units in. You've got to do it in 2 years. You have to do this one before that one. You know, put all those constraints in there and you're pretty much set. You've got no choice really about how you do your units. Okay.
We do have a document that covers all of that, so I could send Damon a copy of that document.
Sure. Good idea, Julie.
Yep. Okay. And
Good.
Damon put it on for mass. Yep.
Okay, so maybe I'll flick through a few other questions. Some of them have been answered, you'll notice, in the chat already by some of our more experienced students already know the answers. So Julie and I could just sit here and watch and you guys could help each other out. No, the answer to this question is quite correct. If you want to do the actuary program units, they're the honours or master's units, can I do them in the last year of my undergraduate degree? Strictly speaking, no. We make the occasional exception for 1 or 2 units, but we wouldn't make an exception for the whole lot. And one of the reasons for the exception is that most people don't do so well if they're kind of doing master's level units or honours level units when they're still an undergraduate. But the exceptions, I think I've made one exception in the last 2 years for that, for a student who got high distinctions all the way through and wanted to do 1 or 2 of the part 2 units. What's the difference between actuarial and business analytics? Good question. So how would I describe that? Well, actuarial is very specifically preparing you for the actuarial profession. So the subjects that you're studying are essentially oriented towards understanding the mathematics of risk and uncertainty, and therefore being able to being able to apply that mathematics to a set of important commonly arising kind of issues in business where risk and uncertainty are prominent, and the most obvious one of that is insurance. So developing insurance policies, figuring out premiums, but also pretty much in any organisation that's making provision for risk, they've got to take, you can talk about risk in words, but you've got to talk about risk in dollars. So you're going to turn that risk into probabilities. You've got to put dollar costs associated with that, and then you've got to turn that into some kind of provision for risk that has to be taken within an organisation. So that's kind of a combination between a little bit of maths, a little bit of data, and a little bit of clear thinking and sort of logical tools around understanding how risk and probability turns its way into pricing and insurance policy. A data analytics person is developing a set of tools in analysing data, full stop, of any sort. So they, or not so much analysing, or partly analysing, but also extracting data. So their application of those tools, if you've done any data analytics subject, could be anywhere from studying the behaviour of tennis players and where they more likely to serve their serves to the forehand or backhand side, or and right through to pedestrian traffic in the city, through to understanding the behaviour of consumers in shopping centres and where they go, and so a whole stack of applications, all of which use data analytic types tools to analyse and draw conclusions and look at patterns in the data. So it's much more broad, but not really theoretically based. So a data analytics person, whilst they can apply their tools in all sorts of areas, often will come into a particular set of data and not really quite know what are the important questions to ask about that data, because they don't have the knowledge of the discipline, and so that the data was based on. So the discipline, for example, so I've got an example of an insurance data set, which has got a whole bunch of information about policy holders and premiums that they are paying and what their characteristics are, like their age and so on. If I give that to a data analytics person, they'll just go playing with that data and looking for patterns. They won't really know what the questions are that they want to answer until they talk to an actuary and say, what we need to know about this data is this category of people more high risk now than they used to be 5 years ago, for example, is the question we want to answer. So we have an actuarial question, we frame it a certain way because we have a theoretical basis for our analytical work. The analytics person can then give us the tools to be able to analyse that. So that's why the two work well together, but on their own, the analytics people probably can't really make a successful career without some sort of other skills in finance or actuarial. Okay, IFOA, Julie, there's a question here about credit with the IFOA. So you would like to talk about that?
Yes.
That's a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So if you get all possible exemptions, including actuary program exemptions, you're eligible to transfer to the IFOA for professional personal reasons. Yeah, so if you get all the way through to becoming a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries, or through all of the education, there is a mutual recognition arrangement, so that if you did want to go and work in the UK, they would recognise your fellowship in Australia. They would probably require you to do some a professionalism course, so that they know that you know the legislation and code of conduct for actuarial practice in the UK. So that's certainly at the end of your education. Whether when you're part way through, it's a bit more, a bit more restrictive. If you've got part of the way through, you might be able to transfer to the UK, but they would only be accepting what you've studied as transfer of prior learning if you've got a good reason for it, in that you actually are now working in the UK.
Does that answer your question, or did you need some further clarity on that?
Just if I could add to that a little bit, the syllabus that we're doing for the foundation program is actually a UK syllabus. So we're following the UK syllabus exactly, and Australia has adopted that syllabus rather than develop their own. So they're very closely sort of aligned. As a few years ago, or till last year, there was actually sort of almost like an agreement, a mutual agreement, that if you got to a certain point in Australia, then automatically you got the credit for whatever you had done in the UK. That's now no longer automatic, but it's still basically there, but you just have to sort of apply for it. So if you do the foundation program subjects, you get exemptions with the Australian Actuaries Institute, Julie recommends that, etc. Then you can turn up to the UK Institute with appropriate paperwork that you do and say, right, I'm moving to the UK. Could you please sort of give me equivalent credit for what I've done in the UK? Process for that, I'm not sure we're totally on top of the detail of, but it's certainly doable, and a lot of people actually do precisely that. There's a similar kind of thing with the US, although it's a little more complicated with the US because the syllabuses are a bit different.
Just moving on to the next one, because I'm a little conscious about time.
Yeah.
We've got one from Srijan asking about doing commerce and finance and wanting to switch to commerce and actuarial, and if that's possible.
Sure, good question.
So from my experience, yes, that's definitely possible. You just go to your course advisor, you go to the Monash Business Course Advice, and they'll help you transfer the units that you've currently done to fit it into the new structure of the new course you want to do. And then you just follow the new structure of your new course from there.
Yeah, very good. Yep. So that's a question for the sort of student services people at the business school, correct? Yeah. Course.
Yeah. So yeah, Monash Business School Student Services.
Yeah, spot on. Yep. Good. Now, someone's got a question here, which is a common question about, I can only finish some of the exemptions. What do I do then? So that could be because you're doing a double degree with engineering, or because you weren't able to achieve that 70% average in all of them, or because you're doing a master's in this case. Whatever the reason, it's very common for students to get to the end of their course and only have 4 or 5 out of the 6 exemptions, or maybe even 3. I think, well, we've looked at the statistics before, didn't we, Julie? Under the old system, there used to be 8 subjects, and I think an average student would get 5 out of 8. So if you get 5 out of 8, or in the current system, if you end up with your course with sort of 4 out of 6 exemptions, don't feel like a failure. You're actually the median student. You know, that's pretty common. And a relatively small percentage, if I had to make a guess, I'd say about 20%, 25% will get all 6 exemptions. It's fairly tough to get them all. So don't be discouraged at that. What people typically then do is go on and do the other subjects by distance education with the UK IFOA, and they do that while they're in their job. And hopefully they're working in an actuarial firm and they've got colleagues down the corridor who are doing the same thing, and they can form little study groups, or they've got a colleague who finished it just 4 years ago and who can help them out. So they're quite common within the organisations for people to support each other through that subsequent study, because many people are in that situation. If they're not finishing off foundation, they're doing the actuary program subjects or their final fellowship program subjects. So a lot of people in your organisation will be studying, and you'll just be one of them. So that's a common situation people find themselves in.
Yeah, that's right, Brett. And employers of actuaries, that they know that actuaries will need to be studying and actually have things like study leave, and will actually, if you pass your subject, they'll pay the costs of the subject, etc. So if you're working for an actuarial employer, they will be very supportive.
Okay, how are we going? Is there any other questions we should pick up on, Damon? There's been a few odds and ends. Let's see.
There's one really quick one from Thomas Cohen asking about the prerequisites, because I think the unit guide was a bit unclear with the ands and ors and the commas. So it would take you like 2 seconds to clear that up. Okay, now is that the one to do with the prerequisite for 3460? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that Thomas's answer, so whose answer is correct, which is if you do 2232, then that's good enough. You can do 3460. You don't need to do 2410.
Having said that, if you're a commerce student, I would pick 2410 instead of 2232. I think it's more aligned, but the other one is adequate. We've got that in there actually because a lot of people want to do 3460. A lot of science students want to do 3460. There's sort of a bit of an interest in the sort of sciences in sort of financial mathematics, and ETC 3460 financial econometrics is one of the few options that they've got to do something which is a bit more data driven, so they actually play with data. So they want to come and do 3460, but they haven't done in the second year 2410, so they come in via 2232. So it's more targeted at the science students. There's a question there about 3241. Yep, there are some good math subjects, correct?
Yeah.
So who's recommended there for those that you want to do a bit more of the maths? Yep.
Got two good questions from Nicholas and Hazel.
Oh yeah. Okay,
which
so
I think are both worth answering.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so Nicholas is asking about the masters. One of the ways you can plan your sort of future is that you get to the end of your undergraduate degree and you've got 5 out of the 6 exemptions, or 4 out of the 6 exemptions. One of the options you could consider would be to do the master's degree, and you get some credit for subjects you've already done. So you don't do the full 2-year masters. You'll probably be able to do the masters in a year and a half. So that's, and you'll be able to include in your master's degree, you can repeat some of the units you've already done, or the 50-year versions of those, and finish off the foundation program exemptions that way. And then you'll also do the actuary program subjects. So and then you'll probably find you've got some elective space as well to often do a few finance subjects. So that's one thing you can consider, and one benefit of going straight on and doing a master's. You can effectively think a similar way with the honours, but you pretty much don't have room for much. In the honours degree, as of next year, there will be an honours in actuarial studies available. So you can do the actuary program through an honours degree specifically. Plus, you might even have, if you just got one more unit left, or one 3rd-year unit left that you need to do to finish off the foundation program, well, you can probably find a way of squeezing that into your honours program. But you're not going to, if you've got 3 or 4 more units to do, you're not going to fit those into an honours year. That's going to suit more the masters. Okay, that's Nicholas. Hazel. Okay, if you didn't get the 70% average, can you redo the units? You can't redo the units as part of your Monash degree. So this is an annoying thing. If you get 60% for a unit and your average overall was not good enough to get 70 in the subject, and suppose 2430 was one of those units, you got 62% for it, you can't repeat 2430 as part of your course because you've already passed it. So you've got 2 choices. You can either do it as a single unit enrolment, which means it's not part of the degree. You just go off and do 2430 and pay a fee for a single unit, fairly expensive fee. Or you can do a new course like the masters. And because it's a new course, you can do units there that you've already done previously. So you do ETC 2430 as part of the masters, for example. Or you get you tick off that foundation program subject by doing a distance education with the institute. So it depends a little bit. If for example you're looking to get CS1 and you've got pretty good marks in 3 out of the 4, all you need to do is just improve that mark in one of those 4 units. Well, that's almost tempting to think I'll just go do single unit enrolment for that 1 unit. But if you've kind of got to do most of them again, then you might as well go off and do the foundation program distance ed, or do the masters or something like that. Okay, so sort of thinking about that as you go.
But just on that real quickly, how does the cost of the master's program or doing single unit enrollment compare with doing it with the institute? Like the cost, or do you know, or Julie?
Yeah. Yes, the short answer is the institute is much cheaper.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, the single unit enrolment that the university offers is an expensive option. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's a little bit like the international student fee, which sadly is very expensive as well. Whereas the institutes, so basically people choose a single unit enrolment if they feel like they really need to have, the on-campus experience. Not that any of you are having that these days. Whereas the distance ed with the institute and the faculty in the UK is very genuinely distance ed. Like there's not even Zoom tutorials and that kind of thing. So it's very much self-directed study, and some people find they just can't manage that. They need the kind of accountability of a sort of week by week homework and all that kind of stuff. But it's a more expensive option.
There's a question on the requirements for the actuarial honours program that many people are interested in knowing about.
Yeah, the entry requirements for the program. I don't remember them off the top of my head. They're not. They've been. The paperwork's been done and it's been submitted and it's going through approvals right now. It will appear in the handbook in September, and it will start next year. So, but the basic principle would be if you've done a major in actuarial studies and you've done all the right third-year units, which you almost certainly will have done because otherwise, you know, you're doing the units that are suitable for exemption, then you just need that 70% average to get into honours. Okay, so it's which is the same as the econometrics honours that's currently offered. At the moment, there's an econometrics honours where you can do the actuarial units. In the future, there'll still be an econometrics honours, but then there'll also be an actuarial studies honours. And the main difference will be, if you look at the current rules for an econometrics honours, the main difference will be that currently the rules for the econometrics honours require you to do ETC 3410 or ETC 3400, which are econometrics units. Those units don't appear in the prerequisites for the actuarial honours because you're not doing an econometrics honours, you're doing an actuarial honours now, and it's replaced by probably 3530 and 3430 or I forget exactly, but it's probably those two units. I hope that's specific enough. If anyone's sitting there thinking, if it makes a difference to your choice of units in semester 2 and you're thinking on it, flick me an email and I'll clarify exactly what the rules are likely to be. But I suspect if you're doing a standard third-year actuarial program with all the units that you need for exemption, just get on your 70% and you'll definitely be eligible for honours.
There are 2 and 3 questions left. So do Julie and Brett have some minutes to spend on these questions, or?
Sure. Yeah, we can finish.
That's fine.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So one of them is about work experience. So part 2 of becoming an accredited actuary requires a year of work experience. And so the question is, what kind of jobs can meet this work experience requirement?
Yeah, I just had a look up on the Actuaries Institute website, so I'll show you that. So this is the Actuaries Institute website talking about saying work and web interchangeably. So work experience requirements, depending on what sort of your transition arrangements, what group of students that you're in. For some previous older students, there's a 3-year requirement. But this practical experience is talking about where you make professional use of what you've studied. So yeah, work that makes use of economic, financial, statistical principles, financial implications, working in the financial services sector, and work in health, energy or academic areas. So yeah, financial sector. Does that?
So doing the research work can meet the practical experience, am I right?
Research.
So if we are doing academic research things, can also meet the practical experience.
That's certainly there in that last dot point, isn't there, about in academic area?
Yep. So as long as it's relevant academic stuff. Yep.
Yeah, relevant. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. So typically what students will do is they'll do the university-based actuary program units first. So that's the 3 units that are either offered through honours or masters. Then they'll go out and get their job, work on that experience criterion, and while they're doing that, finish off the institute subjects, which are more professionally oriented subjects. Good.
Yep, and professional experience goes pretty quickly. Once you start working, time goes quite quickly because you're still studying as well, and hopefully you're working in a job where you get that experience and you're actually using what you've learnt. And it's like what you've learnt helps your work, and work helps what you learn. So it works both ways.
Just a quick answer to Anthony at 357. Your question about level 2 or 3 units, you'll find there's an equivalent level 5 unit dual coded version of the level 2 that you need to do. So just go and look at the master's level fellowship foundation program requirements, and you'll see the level 5 version of it. Pretty sure anyway, but you can email me if you're not sure. If any of you others can pick out a question you need us to answer, please do. Oh yeah, a recording. Yep. So we'll make this, the simplest way for me to store recordings is to put them on my YouTube channel. It gets me more hits and makes me more famous. But so what I'll do is I'll put it up on the YouTube channel later today, and then I'll send to Damon, I'll send you a link for people so they can just, and you can link to it, send that link out to your members and so on.
Yeah, perfect. We'll distribute that.
And I also remember that Brett used to have like an actuarial students email list last year, right? So do you still run that, or?
Yes, we haven't sent one out this year. We've been so busy trying to get ourselves organised in the current world, but you're right, we should do that, and perhaps we could send that link as well. If you like. Yeah, good thinking.
Yes, so maybe people can send your email address to our Facebook page, and we'll send through any relevant documents through your email.
Good idea. Yep. Yep. Okay, well, I think we've actually dealt with most of the questions there. Any?
There's one good question there for our maths representatives about internship. Yeah, off you go.
So, great question about internships. So internships are a really great way to get a taste of what it's like working as an actuary. So I would highly recommend going for, you know, an internship in an actuarial firm, in an actuarial position. And that way you get to, you know, shadow what a real actuary does. You're exposed to some, you know, real client work, and get to do some actuarial work and get to see what it's like in the real world. And you'll see a lot of it is very different to what we do at uni, but also some of the concepts are the same and do transfer through. In terms of where to apply, all of our sponsors, which are on our maths website, they all hire actuaries. They're all interested in people like us. So all actuarial consulting firms, all big financial services firms will also have an actuarial team. And then if you expand your horizons a little bit, actuaries can work in places like data analytics, econometrics, and anything to do with money and risk, as Brett said earlier. So all those are good places to apply for internships, and I highly recommend everyone give it a go, because it's a really good way to try before you buy, and really get a taste of what industry is like. Okay. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up there. So a big thank you to Brett and Julie for hosting this information session. I hope you all found it useful today, and we will send you the recording, and we look forward to being in touch with you soon. So stay tuned to our Facebook for more events like these. Thank you, Brett and Julie.
Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Yep. Yes,
Bye.
indeed. Thank you.
Bye.